And that's such an interesting thing that you said that I never thought about because
The New York City Marathon, daylight savings time, and the world's most epic barbecue. That's kind of what's happening this Sunday. The last one is what's happening in the narrative lectionary text. So change your calendars, go run 26 miles through all 5 boroughs. But this text, 1 Kings chapter 18, is the story of Elijah at Mount Carmel, where he's facing off against a horde of prophets of Baal. Baal. How do you say that God's name, Adrienne?
I say Baal.
Baal. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, but I don't know if I'm correct. But you also have to give me a warning about what you're going to say as the opening because of like the world's largest barbecue. That's hilarious, actually. I like that.
So this text, it's got a lot going on. Can you give us just the Reader's Digest version of this epic showdown?
Yes. So there are prophets everywhere, and they are leading God's people astray. There are prophets of Baal, and I believe prophets of Asherah. 400 for one, 450 for another. And then there's Elijah, who I believe is the last prophet of God. So it appears that our God, his God, is losing because there's only one prophet left. And he sort of sets up a showdown with these other prophets to prove that the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is the one true God. They're on a hill. He tells them to get a bull, to prepare the bull, to put it on wood, and he will do the same. And whoever is able to call down their God to come in fire and consume the bull, then that is proof that that God is the mightiest. Of course, the hundreds of prophets are not able to do anything. They wail, they scream, they cut themselves, the blood is gushing, nothing happens. And then Elijah, as I read it out loud before we got on, it's such like a, it's such a, I don't know, we keep talking about pissing contests, but there's this, I'm really going to show you up. He's like, go get some water, like 4 jugs, and pour it on the bull and pour it on the wood. And he goes, go get some more, do it a second time. And he's like, and do it a third time. I mean, he's really, it's kind of like Muhammad Ali kind of,
Oh
I'm the
yeah.
greatest. It's such posturing, it's such drama. We were saying before, it's probably one of the most dramatic texts in the entire Bible. So after soaking this bull and soaking the wood in water such that the trench around is just full of water, Elijah calls on the God of Abraham and fire comes. And I guess barbecue is an apt metaphor, except you get the notion that the bull is completely consumed. I don't think
Guys, well
there's like
done. Very well done.
there's not a toothpick left. There's it's nothing anybody would want to eat. And then of course the flames lick up all the water, so it's just a dry, dusty
Yeah.
barbecue, if you will.
And Elijah is definitely quite the showman in this story. Not only does he, completely drench his altar, but my favorite part is it's in verse 27. So this is in the NRSV. It says, "At noon, Elijah began to taunt them. Shout louder! Surely he is a god. Perhaps he's deep in thought, or busy, or traveling, or maybe he's sleeping and must be awakened." But other translations take that and spin it to, maybe he's on the toilet. Maybe your God's going to the bathroom. And just the way he's goading these other prophets on, I just think it's hilarious.
It
It's
is
what a character.
hilarious. It is yeah. I love Bible humor, and this is a great chapter for that. Yeah.
I always look at this text and a lot of these Hebrew narratives. I had a professor at seminary, Tom Bogart, who's phenomenal, and he would often talk about these Hebrew narratives where we're not reading history, because if you read these as history books, that's a whole other thing. He says these were likely used within the worship services of the Israelites, of the Hebrew people. And so these are liturgical elements. This is a liturgical narrative that would be told and reenacted in worship. And so all these kinds of ways that we see the story framed is something that that's not just told but reenacted as part of, a way of reminding us who this God is compared to those gods. And I feel like with all the drama in this, you're like, of course, this is a play. Put this on Broadway. This is something that we experience and encounter, and
Right.
that reminds us something about what this God that Elijah represents has done and can continue to do.
And can continue to do. I'm so glad you said that, because in reading it out loud, and very often we encourage you preachers to read these texts out loud because you hear things differently. When I got through all the drama and got to the part where Elijah says, "Not even the answer me, O Lord, answer me, so that this people may know that you are God."
Yeah.
But when he said, "O Lord, God of Abraham," when I got to "O Lord, God of Abraham," I choked up
Yeah.
because, as you said, there's something to this, for people who are faithful followers of this, our monotheistic God. There's something about the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who has been faithful and has brought the people to this point through so many trials and tribulations, that links with our own lives. And all we have to hear, it's like you said the other week, when you hear those first few chords of Seasons of Love from the musical Rent. When you hear the God of Abraham and you hear it read out loud, there's all of that majesty, all of that history just comes rolling in. But I also think our life story that has been orchestrated and shaped and shielded by this same God, it just opens you up, and you're just like a bawling mess, perhaps, when you read these texts out loud.
The other thing that struck me with this one is just the pissing match, but the fact that this isn't the first time that this has happened. Like, this seems to be a recurring theme throughout the Hebrew scriptures, and I think of this because I'm currently editing some of the early chapters of early chapters of Exodus for our Bible in a Minute project, which is all about the 10 plagues, and how so much of the 10 plagues with Egypt was another similar narrative of God of the Hebrews versus the gods of Egypt. And there's a lot of these times when we just see throughout the Hebrew scriptures, which God is stronger. I think of it as like two kids shouting at the playground, "My dad can beat up your dad," and it's just we that theme hasn't left us, yet. And I think there's so many ways. To me, that's kind of a jumping off point for where these kinds of stories continue to manifest in our world today. Like, what are the powers that be that are claiming to be victorious, whether it's, King's three evils of racism, militarism, and capitalism, and what is the God we see in scripture that we follow, and where is that God competing or maybe more compelling than those other gods in our society? We need to call down some fire to burn some of that up. And
It's interesting you say that as well, because I think the God that we get in this story and in vast parts of the Hebrew Bible is the God that the people of that time needed. And I think
yeah,
we get that sort of fiery God in our own lives, in our own stories at certain times. But then there are times when I think we get the peace-loving, nurturing, comforting God. And it's interesting to notice where we are in history and kind of what parts of the Bible we draw on, and just how we name and language God in our music and in our prayers and in our worship. It's a struggle right now with what's going on in the world, in Gaza, and Israel, and Palestine, but also with another mass shooting yesterday. To I think it makes sense that people want this God that rains down fire and consumes everything and can beat your dad on the playground, because we all feel so lost and afraid and bullied. And I think we want a like a big daddy God or a big brother God who's going to come in and just take all those other kids out. And that is, for me, a little heartbreaking. So even though we laugh about the pissing contest part, there's something underneath that, as we said a few weeks ago, continues to show up in our story in a way that also is heartbreaking, because we're like, are we ever going to
yeah.
image God in a way that says like we don't need that God anymore, that we, all the children can play together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely these a narrative like this one and just the current events we're living in, they raise up the questions of, what does it mean to be a person of faith in a world of many faiths? How
Yeah.
do we hold,
Mm,
different even beliefs and religions and spiritualities without just assuming mine is going to then just colonize or overtake yours. But at the
right.
same time, we don't want to let any system of oppression, including Christianity, run rampant and
Right.
oppress others.
Right. And
Yeah.
that's such an interesting thing that you said that I never thought about because Elijah is having this pitching contest with people who have a different understanding of who God
Yeah.
is. And of course, we think, Elijah won, our God is the best, and we just kind of go on. And it's like, well, what about the people who believe in Baal and the people who believe in Asherah? We don't really think about them. I
Yeah.
think in the same way sometimes that people of various faiths might not think about the faith of the Minority Report. So
Yeah.
the way that marginalized faiths are treated in this country. So we just the Republicans just elected their Speaker of the House, who is saying that this is a Christian nation under God, and it's like. At the same time that he's talking about religious freedom,
Yep.
he's saying this is a Christian nation under God. It's like you can't have it both ways. There are people who live in this country who are citizens who are not Christian. And so you see a little bit of that Elijah action going on. Well, we're just going to crush those other gods and crush those
Yeah.
other people. And I
I
don't
mean,
think
that
that's
speaker
so.
has colleagues in Congress who aren't Christians, and it's just
Exactly.
negating his own
Right.
colleagues' existence and their
Right.
point. Yeah.
Right, and that's I think the fright and the heartbreak for Muslim siblings or
Yeah.
even people of no faith. It's like, what do you do when you live in a country that is proclaiming it's a theocracy and you don't claim a God?
Yep.
That's very frightening to live in a place that doesn't see you as a person of faith or no faith or, your gender, your race, your whatever, whatever.
Yeah.
And America is supposed to be something different than what we are showing ourselves to be.
Yeah. Yep. So that all comes into this text. I mean, there's all sorts of little ingredients and angles. So do you? I know we're a little ways away from this coming Sunday, but is there any inkling as to how you'll hold these strands, or what kind of you're feeling drawn towards with the sermon, or is it all kind of like, no, Jim, that's why we're talking. This is helping me and everyone watching write their sermon.
I've never thought about the other believers in this story, and that's very intriguing to me. I think, particularly given where we are in the U.S., but also where siblings are in the Holy Land. So I think I may be exploring that angle a little bit more. How do we proclaim and love and follow the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob without needing to belittle or I don't know, marginalize our neighbors. I mean, I know what was at stake in that context, and we certainly want to talk about the historical context. But I think as we pull it into our own times, when we actually, as Christians, are the dominant force in this country at least, I think we need to just interrogate that a little bit and just think about how we, as followers of Jesus even, I think are called to create space for all people and not to other or marginalize or make less than those
Yeah.
who don't follow Jesus.
Yeah. Whew. That'll step on some toes, ruffle some feathers, but preaching, the work of preaching, I always like to think, is comforting the disturbed and disturbing the comfortable. So this
Yeah.
this angle will definitely do a bit of
So,
that.
right, for sure, for sure. And also, I think inviting people who may be in other spaces. I just don't remember stories of Jesus necessarily bludgeoning people to get them to follow him. I think his offer was very invitational. I think he certainly made compelling arguments, and those arguments were dire and a bit threatening. But he didn't crush people. He didn't, drop bombs on them or, go to their homes and try to cause them harm. He in a dialogical, conversational, very relational way, I think invited them into the better thing, what he felt was the better thing. And it seems like things beyond that cause harm and cancel the flourishing of life does not seem like the way of Jesus.
Yep,
Yeah.
I'm with you there. I'm with you, and I'm grateful that there are, you know, churches and faith communities like that we get to serve, and others we know of who hold such points of view, because there are definitely a lot of faith communities who don't hold that, and they see the need to, I'm right, you're wrong, unless you believe what I believe,
Right.
literally to hell with you. So it's a whole different approach.
It's a different
Speaking
approach.
of my own, teenage years perhaps right now, so it's all there.
Right. Right.
Well, as always, everyone watching, listening, we want to know what you're thinking and scheming and dreaming and wondering about this one. This is definitely a good one. So read it and read it out loud. Like Adrienne said, there's a lot you're going to feel when you do that. The affect of the text comes through, I think, a bit more when we recognize that these stories were not designed for, silent readings, but they were vocal, like oral orations. They were
Yeah.
read aloud in community. So read it aloud to your cat or something, so you and your community can. Don't burn your cat though. Don't put your cat.
No, no
Don't soak your
fire.
cat. Don't go that far. Either anyway, and then let us know comments, questions, all of the things you're thinking about this. We want to hear them. Help Adrienne write her sermon, or take these ideas and drop it into your sermons and Bible studies. And we're gonna keep on going. We're moving. Now we're in the prophets. Elijah this week. I think we get Hosea next week, and then Isaiah. So we're just leapfrogging through this narrative, and then right around the corner we'll be turning into the Gospels before we know it. But first comes Advent. We'll get to that in a couple weeks. So for now, go write sermons, everybody. Go read the Bible, and we will talk with you again on the next one.